Hello, Govind. Thank you for joining us. Before we start diving into solutions, could you give us an overview of the challenges that organizations typically face when it comes to cloud native data protection and cyber resiliency?
Absolutely, Max. So if you think about cloud native organizations and the way they are either developing the applications or they might have lifted and shifted over to the cloud, we could call them as cloud enabled organizations. These organizations are not protecting the resources properly. They know how to protect their application data behind a database or a virtual machine and so on. But if you think about applications on the cloud, they are made up of several of these services and the dependencies between those services. So these organizations are not really protecting those services properly. Let's call them as a metadata for cloud services. So there's not enough protection in their application environments today. And that's a big challenge.
Thanks for that answer. And given these challenges, how can organizations address these challenges effectively? And what should they prioritize when evaluating solutions like cloud native protection?
Sure. So if you think about in terms of really addressing the services that need to be protected, first and foremost is the discovery of those cloud services. Without really understanding how their application environments are really put together, it's very difficult to understand what needs to be protected, what doesn't have to be protected, and also risk assessment. Not every resource in every one of those cloud application environments needs to be protected, right? There's a business critical component of a particular tier of the application, and less critical maybe test and dev and so on. So in order to even understand what to protect, you got to have the discovery properly, identifying those resources, right? Second thing is that not all the resources need to be properly protected. We got to be able to understand the dependencies between those services so that you can identify, across, for example, several hundred load balancers. You don't have to protect all those load balances along with application data. So you can avoid so many of those. So there are segments or tiers of those applications and application environments. And first and foremost is that, you got to be able to discover so that you can assess the risk because of those services to your organization. So it all comes down to the risk, and the way you identify those resources is very, very key.
So, Govind, you built a Pranix, which is now branded as Commvault Rewind, and you've taken a unique approach to solve the problems, the challenges that you were highlighting before. So, could you share your vision? What drove you to create the solution the way it is, and what sets it aside from competitors in that space?
So if you think about the market that existed before Appranix, right? I come from the data storage, data management space, so I have plenty of experience with respect to backup. And Commvault has engineers that go way back to 20 plus years as well. But if you think about before and after Appranix, the key differentiation is that these organizations today and really understand the network of the environment, right? One. Second thing is that it's about resilience rather than data protection. So resilience, by definition, needs a recovery first architecture. Because what is resilience? If the failure occurs, you should be able to come back. Failures are bound to happen due to several reasons. Could be because of a cyber attack, could be because of a regional failure of the cloud environment, or zonal issue, or a misconfiguration of a cloud account, or a particular service failures because these services have their own SLAs. But at the end of the day, when you think about how these applications are put together, having a good understanding of that recovery first approach, and it comes down to how these services really link with each other, meaning the network component of it. And before Appranix, data protection companies really worried about just the data component, meaning protect the data and restore the data. That is one segment. Second is that protect the data, replicate the data to another site to be able to get, let's say, a disaster recovery capabilities. Those were like the table stakes now. If you go to the cloud, most of this functionality is already available, built into the cloud platforms. Now, what's remaining is the recovery, full-blown recovery of the application environment. So we approach everything from a recovery perspective. So we put a lot of effort in terms of understanding how the networking components, the interconnectivity between those services that really make up these applications, right, really drove us to work towards that in a complete application environment recovery mechanism. And that differentiated and that created patterns, that created a uniqueness in the market that has become really, really helpful right now for Commvault plus entire market itself.
So before Arian jumps into his next question, I have a follow-up to that because I also wanted to understand whether scalability here is can also have a challenge here when you're dealing with very large applications in the cloud. So if you want maybe to tell us a bit more on that.
We walk into environments that have like 100 plus AWS accounts with thousands of resources nowadays. It's another reason why within Commvault is very important for us to scale. But if you look at the architecture itself that Cloud Rewind has, it has a very cloud first, cloud native architecture, which means that by definition, it should be auto scaling. It should not only be simpler to use, just like any other cloud service that you see from the hyperscalers, but it should also be able to automatically scale. So we have customers that have deployed us across like 4 different continents, 8 different countries. And within Commvault, we have expanded the regional coverage to 8 other regions, right? So the scalability of the platform is paramount. And luckily, we had quite a bit of time to make the service very robust, even before the acquisition. So we have been in the market for now almost 7 plus years, and we have pretty much understood the level of scalability that is required while keeping the service simpler to use. Right? People should not struggle to turn on the protection for resiliency of all the services. So you can pretty much offload the protection work to the developer, shift left type of mechanisms. Or you could, from an SRE perspective, add a bunch of tags to automatically protect those resources. So if you think about the scalability in the backend, the system automatically scales, automatically scales in when the requirement for data protection and application protection decreases. And when you really need for your recoveries, the system has to automatically write the code on demand really, really fast and be able to run those recovery as code templates automatically across several hyperscalers. And you should be able to do this while the service itself is changing. I mean, Cloud Rewind service itself is changing at an age. So, our service changes anywhere between 6 to 12 times per day. While doing that, somebody is replicating the data every 15 minutes, in every hour, every day, right? So that should not come down. You cannot compromise SLA just because you need the scalability. So all of that were taken into account when we designed, when we architected the solution to begin with.
It's very interesting that Commvault has done a couple of acquisitions in the last couple of years, and I would like to know from you, what do you offer organizations, and what organizations primarily benefit from Commvault Rewind, but also how how do you get that all together? Because Commvault is not only Commvault Rewind. A lot of organizations are looking into, okay, we've got cloud native, we've got our on-prem backup and recovery, we've got in the cloud, we've got all of that. So how does that come all together if you come from your standpoint, so from Commvault Rewind, but also getting all the Commvault tools together? Can you go into that?
Sure. So if you look at Commvault's vision and mission, in fact, it has become an objective to not leave any workload behind. And we are going after every one of the workloads, right? We have proven ourselves to be one of the best, if not the best, data protection system, or now we call it Commvault Cloud, in the market today. We are able to protect not only on-prem, including the physical service. We are not leaving behind those. We are protecting them. In fact, we are protecting them at multiple levels. And we expanded into cloud and cloud native protection as well, with the capabilities acquired from, let's say, Appranix or Clumio and so on. We are now expanding many more workloads. If you look at a load balancer, if you consider load balancer instances as workloads, part of the workload, there's several combinations of these services need to be protected. If you look at custom SaaS applications built on top of hyperscalers, we are protecting them as well. So the entire mission for the company is not to leave any workload behind, and we have a lot of work to do. But on top of that, what's happening is that the data gravity has increased, right? For the applications, if you think about any cloud native application, the amount of data and AI is going to only increase or exponentially increase the amount of data that we need to protect. One. Second thing is that the number of databases and services that need to be protected, right? If you take Lambda or serverless architectures, Lambda is a service that has the data as well. If you look at Aurora service, which is serverless as well as with instances and self-hosted databases running on regular instances, they all need to be protected. In fact, they all need to be protected together as an application, as a distributed and cloud native application. So the challenges for data protection companies, and now we are a cyber resiliency company for a reason, is that take it for granted that the data needs to be properly protected so organizations can trust Commvault. Second, to be able to really drive that recovery first architecture, because it's all about resilience. It's not about just data protection, it's about resilience. When you think about resilience, you have to, again, really put that recovery mechanism. And now you have to decrease your RPO, because when organizations go to AWS, they are looking at Amazon.com, and Amazon.com doesn't come down. So what that means is that you have to really decrease the RPO even if some kind of a cyber attack happens. And the RTO, recovery time objectives, need to be shrunk as well. So you have several challenges in the market today. And comprehensive data protection is key, and comprehensive service protection, understanding all the services through the discovery mechanism, and be able to really drive the hyperscaled services using code to decrease the RTO is also important. So the synergy when we got acquired into Commvault became really perfect, because the company literally wanted to go in this direction, and acquisition of Appranix and Clumio really nicely fit into that entire strategy. That's why you see in the market. I mean, stock market is one of the indicators, but at the end of the day, the revenue and the way we are really driving this protection across several of these enterprises is critical, particularly in Europe. Some of these banks are jumping in, right? So it's a great synergy, and you will see us in the market more and more driving that cyber resilience vision for us.
Thank you, Govind. Thank you very much. I've got one last question, very, very shortly. In terms of future outlooks in cloud native, data protection, cyber resiliency risks, uh, are you anticipating any new challenges? Are you seeing any emerging challenges which may need to be addressed? And how do you see, technology evolving to catch up with those eventually?
Again, if you look at the evolving challenges, data protection is key. So you have the backup copies all over the place, right? Now, these backup copies need to be cleaned. I mean, need to be properly identified as golden copies. How do we know that backup copies are clean? That is one of the biggest challenges. And you have to do it at scale across multiple clouds while keeping those, for example, hybrid nature of the workloads that are protected on-prem. Now they are residing on the cloud as cloud copies. How do you really make sure all these copies can be recovered properly from a resiliency perspective? So there is tremendous amount of work cut out for us, and the market needs a leading platform. And I'm sure, along with the rest of the vendors in the market, we'll be driving towards that trust in the platform to be able to recover and be resilient in the market for organizations, critical organizations, because cyber attacks are not decreasing, compliance requirements are not decreasing. So all of them are really coming together. Security posture has to be implemented along with the backup copies. All those things will drive, right, the requirements going forward for the next decade. We have our work cut out for sure.
Thank you so much for this interview. Very interesting topics, and hope to talk again soon.
Great.
Absolutely, John. Max.